two truths are, voters approving Measure I were few in number and ill-informed, and development of the Lakeview-Mariposa site is neither mandated nor unrestricted. In contrast, some common misconceptions are, Yorba Linda voters overwhelmingly approved Measure I and were well-informed. Development of Measure I sites is mandated. Zoning automatically entitles property owners to build to maximum zoned density and heights. Let's examine these misconceptions. Only 31% of the city's nearly 44,000 registered voters actually voted yes or no on Measure I. Of those, only a small 53% majority voted yes. The winning margin was so underwhelming that a shift of only 469 votes would have caused it to fail. Measure I voters appear to have been ill-informed based on the sample ballot guide and a community education meeting video that contained missing or misleading information. Let's take a closer look at what voters were and were not told about Measure I and the EDCO site. Measure I lumped together 14 different properties to be rezoned, so the ballot question raised many other questions. With regard to the EDCO property, Measure I asked voters, shall ordinances be adopted to allow additional housing units at specific locations, some with increased building heights, in furtherance of meeting state-mandated affordable housing laws, East Side Lakeview at Mariposa? Voters must have wondered, what's an ordinance? What units? What locations? What heights? What laws? What is East Side Lakeview at Mariposa? Voters motivated to search the voter guide for these answers encountered 8 pages of legalese in tiny type, followed by something called impartial analysis by city attorney, and capped off by the majority council's argument in favor of Measure I. To add complexity, these 10 pages were immediately preceded by a similar 8 pages of Measure H, endorsed by different individuals. Measure I was put on the ballot because Measure B prohibits upzoning without a public vote. Measure B requires inclusion of an easily readable map in the sample ballot materials mailed to voters. However, no such map appears to have been included in the sample ballot guide. The ballot guide described EDCO's site merely as East Side of Lakeview at Mariposa and provided a string of APN numbers. Many voters probably wondered what APN numbers are. Few voters, if any, probably took time to do their own research about the site location, and, under Measure B, no voters should have been burdened with that obligation. The community education presentation video said,
the next site includes one property at the border of Yorba Linda and the city of Anaheim. The zoning is proposed for 30 homes to the acre.
This appears to be the only specific information provided in the video about this site. Notice that the slide does not even depict the entire site or its full surroundings. The key details provided in the sample ballot guide about changes proposed for the Lakeview-Mariposa site indicated that a maximum residential density of 30 dwelling units per acre and a maximum building height of the lesser of 50 feet or 4 stories would apply when the site changed to high-density 30 residential from medium-low residential. It appears there was no mention of the 10-unit bonus density that EDCO included in its original application, nor any figures explaining what EDCO's current density and building height limits were under the medium-low residential standard. How were voters to know the magnitude of this change, which increased maximum density by 1,667% and increased maximum building height by 43%? Were voters supposed to be burdened with more independent research? If so, how many of the 7,400 yes voters had the time to figure these things out about this site or any of the other 13 Measure I sites? And what did the city tell voters about what 30 units per acre and 50-foot tall building heights look like anyway? Here's what the community education presentation video had to say.
These photos are examples of different housing types that represent the proposed zoning and density included in the Measure H and I sites.
Both the narrative and photos on this slide misleadingly imply that these photos cover all of the proposed densities and heights included in Measures H and I. Noticeably absent from that slide are photos of a 50-foot tall, 3 or 4 story, 30 unit per acre apartment complex like EDCO's.